Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you doing today? How's life in your world? Please let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you, and I knew yesterday's video would get very few comments and very few views because it was, about a TV show or whatever. But regardless, thank you to those who have watched and commented. Today I want to talk to you about wood. So maybe this is something you're interested in, maybe it's not, but I have been writing an article on wood recently, and it's made me think a lot about these things, which I showed last year and said that I was going to manufacture, but I haven't, and I'll tell you why and whatnot. Essentially, when it comes to woodworking, there are hardwoods and there's softwoods. And this is what the article that I've written has been about. I told you I've been doing some work on Upwork, and one of those is a gentleman I found who's paying me to write woodworking articles. And I don't know when this article will ever go live or whatever. I won't be credited, so it doesn't really matter. But the point is, he asked me to do a woodworking article about hardwood versus softwood. And in writing that article, I kind of hit on something that I've always known and I've always wanted to share, but it just never really had the vehicle for it. And then this little guy came up recently, and I thought, this is perfect. So this is a meeple. It's a board game piece, but I also made it like a pen holder. I don't have a pen locally, but I could put this in there. So it'd be a desktop pen holder. But essentially this is a, 10 scale, severely blown up piece of a board game, or a blown up version of a board game piece. And this was made with a router and a template that was made for me by a friend of the show, and it turned out okay. This one was not made with a router. This was bandsawed and hand sanded and whatnot by me, and it's much worse. These are pine. This is standard 2x construction material, and they're very lightweight and pretty easy to manufacture, but they're the wrong wood for this. And the reason this has come up is because my friend Scott King, who's been helping me work on the book, also publishes a yearly gaming calendar, and he's commissioned me to make a few different shapes blown up to roughly this scale or maybe even bigger. And I said sure. And the problem is, pine sucks for this. And this is one of those traps that you fall into when you get into woodworking. Is you think that you should practice on pine or practice on construction grade wood before you move up to more expensive woods. And often that can be very disheartening. Pine is not easy to work with. It's very soft and very easy to cut, and it's so ubiquitous and so cheaply available so cheaply that it's the first wood a lot of people go to. It is a super fast growing wood. The grain is very, very wide. I mean, you can see here this piece. I mean, this is, I forget what that's called. The grain in this is super wide, super thick. And because of that, it's really easy to mess this up. And that's the thing. The reason I didn't manufacture these guys is because they're so difficult to make look okay. When you try to sand these smooth, the grain tears out because it's very weak. If you even, banging it with your thumbnail, you can dent this thing. It's very, very difficult to get these tight curves sanded without just blowing out the rest, because you'll just cut right into the wood with your sandpaper. It's that light and that fragile. And so if you're new to woodworking and you want to try to make dovetails, doing it in pine is disastrous. Don't ever try it. You'll be so discouraged you'll never attempt it in a better suited wood, any of the hardwoods. So hardwoods, which are not pine, are dense and hard. The thing is, they are much more forgiving than pine, because in pine, if you sand a little too much, you've just ruined it. And hardwoods, it's very hard to sand too much. It takes a lot to sand off. So getting a smooth finish that looks great, even up close, is much easier to do in a hardwood than it is to do in pine. And the difference is, though, it's expensive. I mean, I went to my hardwood dealer this week and bought this guy. This is 8-quarter maple, so this is 2 inches thick. Skip plane, so it's got a decent surface. It's not by any means smooth, but this is a much denser wood. This board was 9 feet long, about 8 inches wide, a little over 8 inches wide, 2 inches thick. This is like $45 for this one piece of wood. Whereas if I'd have bought a 2x8, you know, it would have been like $6. So there's a reason why people just default to using pine, because it is so readily available. It is so inexpensive. Not everybody has access to a hardwood dealer to buy stuff like this. But this is the correct material for making these. This will be a nice light wood that I can paint whatever color I want, like this guy. But it also is hard enough that it can be sanded to a very smooth surface without me having to use body filler or some sort of, you know, whatever to fix all the scuff marks. And that's really all I wanted to say. It's expensive, and it's scary when you cut into something like that. You know, it's a $40 piece of wood, and I'm cutting out shapes. You know, and it's like I don't want to mess up because I'm just throwing away, you know, $5 worth of wood or whatever, however much you cut off. And it can be intimidating, but the fact is, working in hardwood is so much more satisfying because it's so much easier to hit the mark. When you make, you know, a line on your wood and you say, I want to cut straight right to that line, it's so much easier to do in hardwood because it's forgiving, because it's forgiving, because it's hard, it's unforgiving, and so you can just, you know, take small passes and get to the line. Whereas, again, something like this, if I put this on my sander over there, I can just burn it away. It can't do that with that maple. It'll cut it, but it's not going to make it so unusable that it's useless to me. And, you know, going even farther, I showed you this the other day. This is hickory. This is super dense. My saw blades right now are actually probably couldn't cut this. They're dull enough. This stuff is ridiculously dense. I mean, this weighs a surprising amount. It would be an okay choice for this if I had the patience to try to cut these tight radiuses, you know, without snapping saw blades, but I don't. I'm going to probably just make a shelf out of this because it's already in a shelf-like shape or something similar. But, you know, the point is, I don't know if there's a point. Choosing your wood is, you know, don't fall into the trap of thinking that you have to start with pine because you're a newbie. You might find out that you get really discouraged working with this material. It's so light and so easy to mess up that a lot of people just give up because it's too hard. Try hardwood. That's all I have to say. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends, being wonderful people. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hey Doc, wait! I want to ask you something.
Today's random fact comes from Scholastic.com. Who was the first president of the United States to live in the White House? Although President Washington oversaw the construction of the house, he never lived in it. It was not until 1800, when the White House was nearly completed, that its first residents, President John Adams and his wife Abigail, moved in.